Hello, I'm Jeff Beck, and with me today is the co-designer of this fantastic game, my good friend Jeff Krause.
Hello.
We're here to tell you a little bit about Intrepid. In Intrepid, you play an astronaut aboard the International Space Station. And space, as it turns out, is not a very friendly place. All the oxygen you breathe, all the nutrition you eat, all the climate you need to keep you from freezing to death, and all the power you need to keep everything running, you have to generate yourself, which is exactly what Intrepid, the board game, is all about. Well, it sounds pretty easy to generate those things, but unfortunately, there's also a disaster taking place aboard the space station. There's several different disasters in the game. The one we're going to be talking about today is the meteor shower. It works in a certain way, other disasters work completely differently, so watch for those. First, let me tell you a little bit about what you see here on the table. So first off, every player has their own dice. Intrepid is a dice game, but it's not a game of luck or chance. It's a game of manipulating the dice, manipulating the randomness that the dice give you into an optimal state. So you have your dice, and you're replacing your dice on your tiles. Every country has their own set of tiles. They all work completely different. Every country is unique. And so I'm playing the United States. My United States tiles wouldn't work well with Jeff, who's using Brazil tiles. So only I can place my dice on my tiles, and only Jeff can place his dice on his tiles. So we have these tiles. The one exception to that rule is here in the center, we have the center console. The center console is how we can share dice. So for example, if I really need a 5 in order to get my whole system to work, and I just can't make one happen, I might call out to my crew, my team members, and say, hey, does anyone have a 5 they can share with me? And if Jeff had a 5, he would place his dice here on the center console. I would get a new dice, set it at a 5, and then that's how we can work together sharing dice. In addition, we also have a tile tier unlock. This allows us to unlock new tiles. So at the beginning of the game, we're only going to have access to our tier 1 tiles, generally pretty weak tiles. But as we use this mat right here, we can unlock tier 2, tier 3, all the way up to tier 4. We're going to want that because more powerful tiles are what we need in order to survive. In addition, we have several decks of cards. First off, we have our disaster deck right here. Between each round, we're going to flip over one of those cards, and it's going to tell us what nastiness occurs. That deck is stacked with level 1 cards on top, all the way down to level 4 cards on the bottom. They get worse and worse and worse. Once you get to level 4, boy, that's tough living right there. So you want to avoid those as much as you can. Next to our disaster cards we have here are mission cards. These are how we win the game. These are the missions we need to satisfy. There's a certain number of them we're going to need to satisfy before the end of the game in order to win. They generally consume a whole bunch of resources, and so you need to have built up a whole bunch of resources in order to satisfy those cards. Finally, we also have our emergency resupply cards. If at the end of a round you haven't done very well, things are not looking great, you can choose to flip over one of those cards, assuming you're still alive, and it will give you a little boost. But there's also a risk involved, so you don't want to do that unless you are really needing it. In front of every player, you will have these very large resource boards. This lets us track the various resources. Like I mentioned, we have nutrition, oxygen, power, and climate. So we can track these with these little red cubes. Also, you can track the drain just by spinning this wheel. So at the beginning of a 4-player game, everyone's going to start at -6, but perhaps because of an event, I have to increase the drain. I can spin the wheel, and now I'm going to start at -8 each round, so it's going to make things a little harder. We can also track how many dice we have, and then finally how much capacity we have. Capacity is how much money we have. Basically allows us to buy more tiles, more dice, improve the station in different ways. So let's talk about what a typical round looks like. So each round, players are going to be playing simultaneously, which is a really cool aspect of this game because it keeps engagement high. Everyone's going all the time, and also it really lowers any kind of quarterbacking because I'm doing my thing, Jeff is doing his thing, and we're just going. So I don't really have time to tell anyone else what to do. So we're all going to roll our dice, and we're going to be placing our dice on our tiles. Tiles have dice slots that have certain dice restrictions. So for example, this one's going to take any dice 3 through 6. This tile here, this heat rejection system tile, it's going to need 2 dice, and those dice have to be doubles. So that can be a little bit harder to do. Yeah, so you have your dice slot, and then below it, you have an ability. This ability is going to trigger the moment you place your dice on the tile. A lot of abilities will let you manipulate other dice that you've already rolled. Some tiles let you get new dice and then manipulate them. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be taking your dice, placing them on tiles, manipulating dice, getting new dice, placing them on tiles, and on until either you run out of dice or you run out of tiles. The last thing tiles do for us is they generate resources. Sometimes they generate resources by a flat amount. Like for example, this heat rejection system tile, it's going to generate 6 climate. No matter what dice I place on it, it generates 6. Whereas back to this hydrogen fuel cell tile, it's going to generate power equal to the dice I place on it. So if I place a 4 on it, I'm only generating 4 power, whereas if I place a 6 on it, I can generate 6 power. So which dice you place on which tiles is pretty important. Alright, so once we're done placing all of our dice on our tiles, it's time to count up the resources. So we just go around the room and say, okay, how much did everyone generate? Okay, I generated so much power, I generated so much climate, and we track those on our boards. Now, at the end of that round, if anyone is still in the negative, still in the red on their resource board, well, that means you didn't make enough, and it's game over. You starve to death, you suffocate, you freeze to death, whatever the case may be, and this is bad news. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. But assuming you survived, things are going to get worse, because the next thing you're going to do is you're going to flip over a disaster card. And the disaster card is going to tell you what to do. It's going to mess with your engine in some different way. Once you're done with dealing with that disaster card, it's time to spend your capacity. Now, capacity, like I mentioned, is kind of like your money in the game. And how you're going to figure out how much capacity you have, it's basically just whichever of the 4 resources is the lowest at the end of the round. So for example, if we made 8 oxygen, 10 power, 12 nutrition, but only 4 climate, we'd make 4 capacity. So you generally want all of your resources to be increasing at roughly the same rate. You don't want one skyrocketing and everyone else suffering, because it's not really going to buy you that much. So we're going to spend our capacity. We can buy new tiles, we can buy more dice. Once we're done with that, it's time to reset and play the next round. So like I said, generally you play simultaneously, but in order to show you how some different countries work, we're going to play one at a time. Now, there are several different countries in the game, all of them play differently, and they all have a different level of complexity. Doesn't mean one country is more powerful than another, they're all equal on the power level, but it does mean that the puzzle that you have to work through on the different countries can be more or less challenging. And that's really important because you're going to have people of different skill levels coming to play the game. And this way you can have someone who's maybe younger or newer to tabletop games, they can play a lower complexity country, and perhaps someone who's, a strategy ninja can play one of the higher level complexities, and everyone can enjoy the same game at the same time. So I think that's a really cool aspect of this game. So I'm playing United States, which is a level 1 complexity, and Jeff, what are you playing?
I'm playing Brazil, which is level 3 complexity.
Right, so we'll be able to see kind of a lower end, an easier country, and a more complex country. They do go all the way up to level 4, so even beyond Brazil. Beginning of the round, I'm going to go ahead and roll my dice. And I'm playing United States, and I'm looking for doubles. Alright, now I rolled a 1 and a 5. It's going to be a challenge to get to a double there. Thankfully, I have some tiles that let me increase or decrease dice. So like for example, I could place this 5 here, and when I do, I can immediately trigger this ability, gain a new dice equal to the dice I just placed, plus or minus 1. So I get a new dice, and I'm going to set it to a 6. Well, now I have a 1 and a 6. I can do this again, and the cool thing about this tile is it does allow the dice to wrap. So I can go from a 6 all the way back down to a 1. So now I have 2 1s, just what I needed to place right here. And that would be the end of my round for the United States.
Brazil rolls 5 dice in a really cool manner. Now, with Brazil's unique mechanic is that it has all of its tiles start locked except for tiles that have this unlock icon, on them. Now what a tile means when it's locked, it means I cannot use them until they are unlocked. So let's say for example this tile, which does not have the unlock icon attached to it, I have these locks on them that are numbered. Now if I want to use this tile, I need to use a tile that can unlock the locks on them to be able to use them. So let's say here, I want to place a 2 on this tile that's already unlocked, and it says unlock the tile with lock equal to a 2. And so I unlock this one, and now I can use this tile. And so I place a 4 there, right? And then the special ability is I can move the 2, unlock another tile with it. It's an advanced mechanic attached to Brazil. But let's say I want to unlock a different part from this tile, and I put a 1 here to unlock the 1. A little redundant, but it's great. And then I can take this 2 and 3 in Brazil to be able to complete my turn and fill all of my tiles.
All right, so once we're done manipulating all of our tiles, it's time to count up our resources. So we're just going to count these out. So let's start with nutrition. Jeff, what do you got?
I produce 6 nutrition.
Okay, so move that up there. And let's see, it looks like we got UK, they also produced 6. All right, and now let's go with climate. I produced 6 climate, and Japan over here produced 5 climate. Okay, next up, oxygen.
So with oxygen here, I produce, this is the die number, which is a 4. So I produce 4 oxygen on this one, and then 1 for each one of these. So I produce 6 oxygen. Moving it to there.
Okay, and the United Kingdom also produced 6 oxygen.
We go up.
All right, and then finally we have power. And let's see, this one produces 3 for each dice I have on it. So I have 2 dice, so that's 6 power. And then Japan actually produced 8. So we move the resource meter on power. So now it's time to add up and see how much capacity we made, which again is going to be our lowest. So it looks like we have 6 oxygen, 8 power, 5 climate, and unfortunately only 4 nutrition. So our capacity is at 4. Now 4 is not great, it's not the worst, but it's not fantastic. So it is low enough that maybe we want to discuss flipping over one of these emergency supply cards. Jeff, what do you think?
This should absolutely be discussed with a team.
Yes.
So I say yes.
Okay. All right, let's do it. So we're going to flip over an emergency resupply card, and that's going to give each player 2 more capacity. So that's a good thing. Now the downside is, if you see on this card, it also has this little symbol here, and it says +2 to the nutrition drain. So if we ever flip over a disaster card that has the same symbol, we're going to add 2 to the nutrition drain, so it can make matters worse for us as well. But we won't worry about that right now. Instead, we're going to go ahead and flip over this disaster card. And so we got a firestorm. So we're going to roll the disaster dice, and we got a 7. We're going to hit all tiles in sectors 7 and 8, which is not fantastic. But what do you do? So we're hitting all of our tiles here with these little meteorites. Now what this means is in future rounds, each of these tiles will produce 1 less resource. So that's not terrible. It's something we can live with, but it's going to build over time. Now that's not the end of the card, because it also says we need to pick one of those tiles and disable it, which means in the next round we'll not be able to use that tile at all. Jeff, any chance you have a tile that you can disable?
Absolutely. Me as Brazil love to give up my tiles to be disabled.
Okay, very generous of you. There you go, pick a tile.
And we will disable this tile right here.
Okay, who needs it? All right, so now the disaster card is done, so now it's time to spend our capacity. So we can buy more dice or we can buy new tiles. Jeff, you're definitely going to need a tile to handle that disabled tile.
And I have my eye on this 3D food printer, which produces nutrition. So I will spend the 6 capacity to build that tile. Now, the other downside of building new tiles is that they add more to the drain. So if you can look at this 3D food printer, it adds 2 to the climate drain.
Right, so its climate starts at -6 each round. Now it's going to start at -8. So we just spin the wheel, and climate is going to be a little bit harder. So maybe as the United States, I'm going to look at my climate tiles to try and offset this. And so this is how you need to work together to make sure you're buying the right tiles, to make sure nothing is really tanking too hard. Once we pot a tile, it's time to pull back our dice, reset, and start a new round. So that's the basics of how to play Intrepid. We encourage you to go take a look at the rules so you can see how some of the other countries play, get a little more details, and thanks for taking a look.